when you feel low, you can still go. Even when you feel slow, you can still go. Even when there's no hope, you can still go. I never answer to no, man, I still go.
Hello, welcome back. So last time we talked a lot about anchors, and we got both our HTML and our CSS going to do various different things for the anchors, including some various attributes and styles and links and behaviors. Now, today I want to get into, actually kind of go backwards, just take a step backward and rediscuss the CSS selector categories. We did discuss simple selectors. On this next slide, you've seen these before, which are the element, universal, class, and ID selectors. And those are known as simple selectors with tag name, class, ID selection. And then we're going to go ahead and discuss combinator selectors for this video, and then we'll break down each of the next videos and very quickly go through pseudo class and pseudo element and attribute selectors. For now, I'm going to focus on the combinators. Now, very quickly, as we're stepping into this, I also wanted to note, you saw this in the last video, but we can take, if there are similar, for example, we have similar declarations, and we're targeting different selectors, then we can combine or group those, group would be the better word, and we can group by comma delineated spacing here. So we have an H1 comma, a paragraph, comma, a heading 3, and then each one of those things will be targeted. If you left out the comma, it would mean something different, and your program would try and do something different than what you probably want it to. But in any case, then you only target the color once. You only make that declaration once with the property and the value, and it will target all three things. So pretty straightforward. Combinator selectors are, we have 4 different ones that we're going to talk about as far as combinator selectors, descendant, child sibling, and general sibling. And you'll see here that this one has a space, and that's this little blue box representing a space, and you'll notice there's no comma here, which is why I wanted to very much note that there was a comma here, because over here, if you didn't put a comma, it would be considered a descendant selector. And so we have color light salmon again here for each one of these, and they all are targeting both a div and an anchor, but they're targeting different things in different ways, and we're going to get into what each one of those mean. But for now, descendant is a space, and a child selector is going to use the greater than symbol. A sibling selector is going to use the plus, and the general sibling is going to use the ampersand. Or no, not the ampersand, I apologize, the tilde. Let's see what each one of these really mean in practice. So starting with the descendant selector. We have our previous anchors that we set up in this. And with these, we can start targeting different things based on how we've set this up. And we might move around 1 or 2 things here, but you'll get the idea very quickly. I'm going to keep most of the anchor stuff how it is as far as what colors we're targeting and whatnot. And as I just showed you, one thing that we want to do is we want to eliminate unnecessary things. So for example, here we have this separate anchor rule, CSS rule, and we don't really need that. We can combine those, and that's part of keeping things dry. DRY, don't repeat yourself. You're going to hear that probably often throughout programming for as long as you do it. And we want to go into the descendant selector. So how are we going to do that? Well, we have this particular anchor tag up here that is not childed to a div, but we have these other ones that are childed to divs. All these, plus in the styling, we have a div, and then within that div, we have it childed here. And so we want to learn how to target these things in different ways. But the very first one is going to be that div A, and we're going to, matter of fact, we could probably color this light salmon just as we did here. And let's go back over to our page and open it. And so nothing is currently colored. Either I need to refresh or I didn't. Oh, div with an uppercase. I don't know why I did that. Force a habit. Okay. So nothing is, oh, color. Let's try instead. I want to make it more obvious. Background color. All right. Getting going, getting going. There we go. Okay. So now, going back to what we were saying. We have a bunch of things with a bunch of anchors that are inside of divs, but that home one is not inside a div. And so what you can see that the Descendant selector does is it selects the anchor, all anchors inside of all divs. And so we can look in here and we can see each one of these. This anchor is inside of this div and so on and so forth, except for that top one as we discussed, which is not, and that one is not going to be targeted for this particular thing. So let's jump back over here and we're just going to very quickly go into child selectors with the greater than operator. And you know what, just before that, just so I can show you something here, we have div and div A. Now check this out. Now, not everything gets it, but these do. Why is that? Well, very simply, we have the style-based styled hyperlinks, which have a div, and in those divs are an anchor. So what we're saying here is only when we see an anchor inside of a div, and then that's the only time that we're going to target those things. So what happens here now when I use the greater than symbol, and we're going to go ahead and switch it over to this child selector now. And look at that, just like before, all of these are styled except for that first one. And so the child selector is saying anything that is a child of something. This anchor is a child of a div. And likewise, if I did the same thing here, then we have anchor that's a child of a div within a div. And so we can work our way up like that and see that these only these ones. So then you might ask yourself the question, well, what's the point of this thing here, right? Because if we do this, it's styled the same, or if we do this, this is styled the same as not having that, right? And so you might ask yourself, okay, so what is the point of that thing? And what we can do is we can come back in here and we can stick this inside of instead of a div, we're going to call it a section. We're not going to call it that. There is an element called section, and this anchor tag is going to fit in there. And now you can see that according to this, we're looking for all anchors that are children of divs inside of divs. So we have these ones are children of divs, and those are inside of divs. So those ones get colored. But over here, we have this one here is not a child of a div. It's a child of a section, which is a child of a div inside of a div. In which case, we are not targeting that specific one. And that is the difference, because if we took this away, all of a sudden that would be styled again. And the difference is that now we're targeting all anchor tags inside of a div, and it's not necessarily a specifically a child of a div, because right now that other one, when I do it this way, that's a child of a section down here, versus when I do it this way, it's a child of a section, but it's also inside of a div, so it qualifies for being targeted. So you have some Descendant selector knowledge now. You have child selector knowledge. Let's go on to sibling selector knowledge. And the sibling selector is the plus sign here. So what is a sibling? Well, over here in, matter of fact, before we even do anything, let's look at what it looks like just the normal way. Okay, so we have this, and we come back over here and we take a look, and nothing at all is styled. And the reason for that is because we have nothing where an anchor tag is the sibling after a div. So this means after, comes after. And how that works is kind of funny. So if I copy, for example, this one right here, and I put it after this div, well, you know what? Yeah, that'll work. So after that div, then all of a sudden we have this repeat one that is styled differently. And the target div plus a, which is div or all anchors that are siblings of div. How is it a sibling? Well, it's a sibling because it is inside of this div and it matches with all the rest of these divs, and it comes after this div right here. And so if we had, for example, one here, you can see it added color text. Here it is. It added this one here, but it didn't actually style it because it doesn't come after a div, which is the important piece here. So when we say anchor and is a sibling of a div, so then we see a div, and we see this div too, which is another sibling of that div, and this is another sibling of that div. But because this is not inside of this one or this one, now it's a sibling along with this one, and now as a sibling, and after, specifically after the first div, then that's when it qualifies. And so I can put one more here, and you can see also that now that one qualifies because it came after a div. And so when we target now, when we target down here, I'm going to create two more. Now I just want you to see something. Okay, it targets the first one after, not the one after that though. And let's go ahead and discuss now if you want to target both. If you want to target everything that's a sibling child. Now this gets complicated and wordy here. All right, General Sibling Selector. A General Sibling Selector is any anchor. It's just like Sibling Selector except for it's any anchor. So any one after, not just the first one after. That's the big difference here. So the Sibling Selector has just the first anchor that's after a div and is a sibling, meaning, you know, brother, sister, same level. It's not one level deeper or one level higher as far as having one more parent or one less parent. This is that same rule, except for it targets all the ones following that. And so if we change this from a plus to a tilde, go back to our program, then you can see down here at the bottom it's targeting each and every one of those. Okay, Descendant Selector, when we put a space, then this anchor is inside of a div. However, a child selector, this anchor is directly a child of a div, not just inside of one. And so if this anchor happens to be a child of a section or something else, then it's not going to get targeted because this is specifically childed to a div, not child to anything else, whether it's inside of a div, inside of a div, inside of a div, or whatever, right? And then you have your Sibling Selector, which says, okay, this anchor after a div, as long as it's a sibling of that div, then we'll go ahead and style it. So an anchor that is a sibling of a div and it comes after that div. This General Sibling, same thing as the sibling, except for it targets all of them, whereas the sibling just targets a single one. The General Sibling is going to target all of them. And I hope that helps you clarify a little bit what's going on with the Combinator Selectors. I appreciate you stopping in, and I will see you in the next one.